75 revolutions, Stuart. So what made you want to undertake this task? Because it's a hell of a story, isn't it? And it's been told before. So what do you bring to it that's different?
Well, Terri Hooley's my pal. Back in the day when I was a kind of a young punk musician, I assumed that Terry would sign me to his label, Good Vibrations, and I would be on the same roster as the Outcasts and Rudi and the Undertones. And every time I came in with a demo, he kind of brushed me away. So I was eternally hurt that he didn't make me a punk rock superstar. And with good reason, because my demos were always terrible. So once I came to that realization, and then we kind of reconnected and became very good friends. And so Terry's been my mate for 35, 40 years. So we became friends after that, and basically a lot of versions of Terri Hooley. There was a book 12 years ago. There was a stage play. There was a kind of a film, a brilliant film called Good Vibrations. And I just thought, I want to write my version. I want to take my run at the story. And that's what I've done. And Terry's obviously so much has happened in the last 12 years. He's become a folk legend. 20 years ago, Terry was this bloke who would tell you stories in the corner of the pub and nobody would listen. And now he's become this renegade figure in Belfast.
So is the book partly dealing with that then? Dealing with
I think to a degree the film and the stage play and stuff are all 1978. Terry sets up a record label and signs the Undertones. And he had 15 years of being a radical before that. So I think a lot of the story is, how did we get there? Well, and Terry was very kind about his archive. So we got a lot of stuff out of his archive. And you suddenly realize when he was 14, 15, he was writing letters to the Belfast Telegraph about the war in Vietnam. And in 1966, he was getting arrested for being a potential troublemaker. And all of that stuff is fantastic. And he was writing underground magazines in 1970. He was just up to mischief. So by the time punk rock arrived, Terry was ready. It wasn't like this ridiculous man that just fell into it by accident. There was a kind of a plan. In the same way that Tony Wilson had a plan before Factory Records happened. He knew that he wanted to shake things up. And it wasn't about money, it was about mischief and alternative politics.
Yeah, so Terry, this is the stuff I was really interested in the book. The backstory, this thing, the hippies' revenge, it goes back to the 60s, and the sense of the counterculture, but played out in a city that wasn't really known for it. Obviously Liverpool had its story, Manchester had its story, London and San Francisco have the stories, but not Belfast, which seemed to suddenly appear like you in punk. But there's a backstory, goes back to the 60s. So can you give us a sense of what that was like in the 60s for you in Belfast?
The 60s was fantastic for me.
Can you sit back a bit, because I can only see your mouth? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, technology. I'm more back to the caves. No, to grow up in Belfast in the 60s was just wonderful. And I love Belfast, and my love affair with Belfast has died recently, but I love Belfast. And there was 80 clubs in and around Belfast where you could go and hear live music, from little small church halls to huge ballrooms with revolving stages and all. And I used to mitch off school and tell them I had to go and see the hospital to see about my glass eye. And on a Friday, I go down to the Plaza Ballroom and meet all these older girls. And it was just fantastic. And they'd have bands playing and all. The 60s to me, Belfast was like a party that you thought was never going to end. And then in 1969, when the Troubles came, we put on our last gig as the Belfast Belfast Blues Society in the War Memorial Building. And my Duke Boy Bonner over from America, and he played. And we weren't sure there'd been trouble. All the bars closed at tea time. The whole city centre closed down. It was pretty scary. And then we eventually got him from the airport. And my friend Pauline, who was my mentor and troublemaker, allegedly, girl, he got up and kissed him and all. And then 30 years later, I find out he went away and he wrote a song about it in London. But that was the night that I realized that the kissing had to stop, that the party was over, and that Belfast would never be the same again. And I was quite right, and it never was the same again. But and I still hanker for the old Belfast. I had to go into Belfast recently to see the deputy editor of Rolling Stone, and I got the train up, and I was on the phone, and it was my ex, and I didn't notice it for all the smack addicts. We never had that problem. They had it in Dublin and other cities, but we didn't have it during the Troubles. And they were harassing poor tourists, and we were walking in front of cars. And it's 6 o'clock at tea time. I was going to call in the Crown. I don't drink much these days. You'll be glad to know, John. But was going to call in the Crown and say hello to the staff. And there were fights outside the Crown Bar. And I had two record shops in Great Victoria Street, and I didn't recognise the place. It was filthy. And then I went around to the Grand Central Hotel. It was my first visit there. I'd been in the original Grand Central Hotel with bands like the Rolling Stones, who were wonderful. And I'm just so glad to get into a safe place. But I felt frightened in my city, a fear. I've been in shebeens in New York, Latanics and shebeens, where the cops go, oh, they're at it again tonight. I've been in clubs in the Caribbean where very few white men have been in, and I've been in some dodgy places. And this is my hometown. This is a place that Gary Lightbody says I live and breathe, Belfast. And I felt fear. And I went in and I was glad to sit down there. And then there was two Chinese women who were all Gucci and Chanel came up to me and went, would you mind if we sit there? And I was giving them the Belfast. But, oh, of course, please do. Welcome to Belfast. Where are you from? And they went, Antrim Road. I thought they were from Shanghai or somewhere. And I just went, I love it. And I wrote about it on Facebook, and people said, Terry, don't go near Castle Street, don't go Royal Line near. And my Belfast, my love affair with Belfast is over. It's not the Belfast I knew and grew up with. Even in the Troubles, I had so many friends that I'm thankful for who guarded me back, and we all looked after each other. I don't think I like modern society.
Would you say? The book's obviously 75 revolutions because you're 75 now. Would you say these revolutions are a way of linking back to a fable period or a period you understood in the pre-Troubles, older Belfast? Is it trying to reconnect with that?
Well, I've never grown away from that. I do an internet radio show, and I'm always playing the 60s music and stuff. 60s was my favorite era, not the 70s. I lost too many friends in the 70s. But the 60s to me was a wonderful time. And it was just a great experience. And I was always more interested in world politics than I was in the politics at home. When I grew up in a very Presbyterian society where I wasn't allowed out on a Sunday to play football. And, I was at church 3 times on a Sunday morning and Sunday school and at night. And they used to lock up the swings in Belfast. And then when I was 17, I set up a folk club in the World Socialist Party offices in Belfast. And of course, the authorities closed it down because you weren't allowed to have any entertainment on a Sunday. This is the Presbyterian society that I grew up in. And then after that, Dougie Knight, who owned a record shop, asked me to come and get involved and run the Blues Society with him. And we used to have 5 acts on a Sunday night. 1 and 6 in for girls, that was my idea, and 2 and 6 and got free coffee and biscuits. And the police came and closed it down. This is the sort of society that I was living in. But everything was exciting and everything was wonderful. And Belfast was a great place to live in. And you could, in Belfast, you could walk out of a job in the morning and get a job in the afternoon. It was like that. If you weren't a Catholic, that was, because they used to advertise in the paper, no Catholics need a pry and all that. There's all that shit in the background, but people were getting on really well. And we had the worst housing in Europe and stuff like that. So in the 50s, my father, who was English and was in the Labour Party, they would be marching on May Day with banners like 1 man, 1 vote, which we didn't have in Northern Ireland. Yeah, we get everything late. I mean, what surprised to me is I set up the first gay liberation meeting at Queen's University when Paisley was doing his Ulster Against Sodomy campaign and all. And I had paramilitaries on both sides coming to the door in case the Paisley came to try and break it up, which was interesting. But and now I am surprised how quickly Northern Ireland has embraced the gay population. The Pride Parade is huge in Belfast now. So
it's the biggest parade I read the other day.
One of these days it's going to be bigger than the 12th of July parade, and I look forward to that. So good.
I mean, Stuart, how do you get all these stories into one book? I mean, I would imagine even the process of doing the interviews with Terri took about 5 years. So
he kept me off the brandy.
I've interviewed Terri about 20 times over the last 10 years. So I've all these transcripts and kind of old school journalism. I keep filing cabinets and old cuttings and press releases. And so it's a matter of weaving it all together. And I'm a kind of an amateur photographer. So a lot of the book is trying to make it look really nice and trying to do justice to the events that Terri was part of. But you know, Terri doesn't always get to the point in a story, or he'll tell you 4 anecdotes simultaneously, and you have to say that second story you started, what's the punchline? And he's maybe forgotten. So it's kind of fun, and but I think I got sense where sometimes things were misinterpreted or things were a bit skewed with, and I got people to contribute to the book. Brian Young from Rudi wrote some beautiful stuff. Greg from the Outcasts, and people from the old anarchist era like Dave Heintman, Terri's wife. She spoke as well. Ruth. So I got different facets of Terri, and then at the end it was like, I want to write about our friendship. I want to write about how you grow old disgracefully, how you can be 75 and still cause trouble, still put it up the man. So all those things are in the book. So it's not a standard music biography. It's a sort of a messy response to the beautiful human being that's Terri Hooley.
It's also a way of telling the Belfast post-war story, you know, through the counterculture and pop culture arc.
I think music saved my life, definitely. You know, I was sort of 16, 17 when the Harp Bar was going and Terri was putting out Rudi records and Undertones records. Bands like Protex were at school with me, so they were the year ahead of me in school, and Terri put a record out and they got signed to Polydor and were being managed by Main Man, David Bowie's management company. And it was like, fucking hell, I'm going to do this. So at a time during the conflict, when you were kind of considered worthless, nobody wanted to speak to people from Northern Ireland. We were all considered to be these kind of crazy psychopaths. And for someone to say, actually, you can be a creative person, you can be young and you'll be useful. You know, there was a Rudi song called Time to Be Proud. And we were all at the Harp Bar singing Time to Be Proud, and it rubs off on you. So music kind of brought a whole generation out of conflict and made people politically aware, you know, and people were bringing songs by The Clash and the Sex Pistols into their lives. And then we had bands like Stiff Little Fingers and Rudi and Outcasts who were bouncing into our world, you know, through their prism. So it was a period of great liberation. And, you know, a lot of my friends from that era, it's indelible, it's in you, you know, and you're going to carry that for the rest of your days. And Terri had 10 years of radicalism before that. So that's where I enjoyed putting the little pieces of the story together. And you know, I think it matters. And I think some of the other treatments of Terri have been a bit Walt Disney. You know, it's about, hey, everybody's fighting, Terri arrives, and it's all good. And you know, there were psychopaths before and plenty of psychopaths after. But after 1978, it was clear that there was an alternative. And I think that was the really important thing. So, and I was writing it, I was thinking about that Johnny Cash video, Hurt. You know, that even at the end of his days or late in his senior years, Johnny Cash still had an honesty and a passion. And I kind of get that in Terri, and I wanted to try and reflect that as well.
So Terri, I mean, this is great. I mean, would you say like this, your story, it's not that, like you said before, it's not like 2 or 3 years in punk. This is a fluid, ongoing story. It starts way earlier than people have alluded to before, and it's continuing now, isn't it? So we're still in the middle of the story, aren't we?
Well, the thing is, John, that I was never meant to live this long. The doctor's great doctor, best doctor I ever had, Dr. John Malott, told me in the 60s that if I didn't stop partying and taking drugs and drinking, I would never live to see 30. There was no point in stopping. And then they told me I'd never live to see 40. And they told me I'd never live to see 50. At 50, I decided to have another child, look after me at my old age. When my son was 50. Plan, not a mistake. So I was never meant to live this long. And all those years I was waiting to die and I didn't give a fuck, basically, about a lot of things. But and then Stuart, I mean, I didn't realize that Stuart and I were so close. I mean, we'd done things together, we'd done DJ together and been in London with him and stuff. But until he put out Trouble Songs, he was doing an interview with the Irish Jews and says, "Who's your best friend and where did you meet?" He says, "Terri Hooley." Terri Hooley turned down my first punk band, well, turned down the second one too. And he says that in 1980 we made our peace. Well, I wish they had told me, because I could know they're going to knock me down with a feather. Right, I thought we had an ongoing argument for 30 years, not so much of an argument, a difference of opinion. But I didn't realize that. Then when I looked at it, when I thought about it, just we had a great time in Liverpool, we had a great time in Belgium, we'd done this and we'd done that. And I realized. And the thing is, I'm glad because most of my friends are dead. 15 years ago, I lost 37 friends in 1 year. And I could not like Facebook friends. I couldn't believe that. I started to think it was Dr. Death. But I met somebody to be dead next week. So I thought I better start making a few new friends. But I mean, I have a lot of people to thank for me still being alive. And unfortunately, a lot of them are dead. A lot of good people.
So one of my things about Terri is you get these moments of illumination and truth at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you wake up the next day and you go, what the fuck was all that about?
So have you managed to work it out in the book?
Not really, no.
Excuse me. That's the old Terri. We don't talk about the old Terri. This is the reborn Terri who hardly ever drinks.
But there's a piece in the book where Terri is adopted by 3 girls. He can tell you about it himself, but he became a project. So it was like Pygmalion, you know, this child that was considered educationally subnormal and who had been bullied and messed around, and they took him to art galleries and gave him books to read and created the Terri that we know today to a degree. And I think that's a really interesting part of the story. And sadly, one of the girls was killed in a car crash, and Terri was quite giving in terms of helping me to understand that part of the story, you know, that there was social mobility in the 60s and you could, you know, escape from your box of poverty or being working class and be proud and be articulate. And I think you know, any understanding of Terri comes from a bit of that story as well. What do you think, Terri?
Yeah, well, it certainly changed my life. So they did.
I mean, that's a really important message. I think that runs through what you actually did yourself years later with Good Vibrations. You know, that empowerment, which is, you know, for somebody who grew up with punk, was the most powerful thing that came out of punk, and you're living in scapulation of that. So that story would be really interesting to hear, Terri.
Yeah. Well, punk in Belfast wasn't as easy as it was in Chelmsford or somewhere, you know. I mean, Greg was interviewed for Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland, the story about the troubles in Northern Ireland. And Greg says, these guys live in a hard bar. We're not some, like there weren't a lot of hipsters from London, from walking up and down Chelsea. These guys were completely bonkers. And a lot of them had paramilitary connections and all. I mean, there were a lot of people didn't like us bringing the kids together, and I got threatened many a time. But a lot of punks were his fathers are well-known paramilitaries, or brothers were paramilitaries and stuff, and to turn your back on all that, there was a very brave thing. Punk to me in Belfast was a really brave thing, and the punks are my heroes. But they were completely different from the fashionable punks of London, I'll tell you that. And I always say about Belfast punk, if you got 10 punks in Belfast to tell a story of punk, you get 10 different stories, and every one of them would be valid. And I mean, what I wanted to do from going to all those wonderful concerts, I was there in the Stones' first concert in Belfast. I was there the night that Led Zeppelin did Stairway to Heaven for the first time, and nobody liked it. I was there to see the Who, the Kinks, and everybody. I mean, I just embraced the whole. And then overnight, it died. People stopped coming to Belfast, and I mean that was a terrible thing. And I couldn't believe how quickly my city became divided. And it must have been all under the surface. I hadn't seen it. But then when punk came along, it was a time for to get the kids united. And when I went, I'm just an old hippie, call myself a hippie anarchist. But when I went to see punk, and the police came in and tried to break up the gig, and then the police left it. And the one you don't see in Good Vibrations, the film, is they brought the local army, all sort of entrance, went in and broke up the gig. But those kids had no fear, and they stood up to them. And I went, this is what I've been waiting for in my life. This is anarchy. This is what I. And that was my on the road to Damascus experience. And I embraced punk. And I'd been collecting American garage bands for years, and from the '60s, and I had bought the Ramones' first 12-inch and stuff. I mean, it wasn't like that was the night I got turned on to punk, and I just was the best thing that ever happened to me was discovering that there was punk in Belfast. It was wonderful. It wasn't easy. And when we first started the label, even the local BBC were dead against us. All these guys who were producers who had been in show bands and hated our music, but I had friends in the BBC. I had friends everywhere, journalist friends, and everybody was very supportive. And then when we went to London, the London record companies didn't want to know us. When we were all madmen and all, but with our charm and personality, we won them over. I mean, speaking of which, described my office as a dinky toy telephone box. But when you think about the 20 bands that got signed up, from Rudi, the Outcasts, Victim, the Undertones, the Moon Dogs, Kisses of Back Robbers Grill, all those bands got signed up. I should have been a millionaire, but I didn't do it for money. Grew up in poverty, I'm going to die in poverty. Be happy.
There's also great stories from the '60s about the time, like when you punched John Lennon, and you still a black story.
That again.
It's a great story, though, isn't it?
I had set up Radio Harmony, Pirate radio station. We didn't know what we were doing. I'd always been in the pirate radio station. For years, I used to go over the border and do my reggae show, broadcasting love, peace, and understanding in the north. And the equipment blew up one night. And I went over to London, and I was looking for money for modern magazines. And there was 40 of us. We called ourselves a tribe. I think I'm the only one of the original members left in Belfast. But then I got to see meet John Lennon, and that was a mistake. Because I'm a Stones fan, always been a Stones fan. And things got out of order. And there's a bit of a, and I go, where's the ass of me talking about it? All that people want to do is talk about the night that Dylan told me to fuck away off. When I protested at his gig, And the manager came down during the break when all the folkies would walk out when Dylan came on electric and said, Bob wants to know, I put up these posters. Bob wants to know what your request is, as I'm here to protest about Bob not withholding his taxes. And I went, oh, for God's sake, I've enough problems with the folkies. Come and meet Bob at the hotel later. And I went round and eventually got my meeting with Bob, and then I told him, and he says, I'm not a protest singer now. Why don't you fuck off and never speak to me again? And they never did. But I came down the stairs of the hotel, and there was about 80 to 100 people outside. And I said, did you meet Bob? And I said, yes. And they all cheered. They said, what did Bob say? And I said, well, he told me to fuck off and never speak again. And they all cheered 10 times later. Remember that? But the John Lennon thing was just an argument. He was off his head in heroin, so he was. And he was a supporter of the IRA. I found John Lennon very confrontational. That's all I can say. And I was more laid back. So I was. But I wasn't a supporter of the IRA. I could understand why the IRA exists, but I'm not into bombing people and shooting people. Just dead against that. Not workers anyway.
Is that the overriding message of the book, really? Yes, say, Stuart, that you can have a revolution without the violence. You know, you can actually have a cultural revolution that becomes a revolution. Is there a positive message that comes out of the book?
I think Terri and the gang of people around him had the bravery of their convictions, and they thought there was another way of doing things, and it was about the importance of counterculture. And I think a decade later, counterculture saved my generation. And I think now you've got bands like Problem Patterns, Kneecap, Enola Gay, and I think Belfast always has really important counterculture. And I think it's great to be able to go, well, what happened in the 60s reflected in what happened in the 70s. What happened in the 70s is informing some of the stuff that's going on now. So being kind of proud and brave enough to say what you think, to read about it, to think about it, to talk about it. And Northern Ireland is such a mess of a place. And I think counterculture is so important to help us to break through all of that. The sectarianism, the statism, all of the dirty stuff that comes with the colonial history of Ireland, and Terry's part of it, punk rock part of it, and all the new kids, or the Kneecap are definitely part of it, and Problem Patterns are kind of showing us a different way. So we all despair about Belfast, and me and Terry meet once a week and moan and protest about what a mess it is. And then we get excited when we hear a song that says, here's a fix, or here's a door out of here, or here's a rallying call. So Terry's still very important, and that in the threads that go through that over the decades.
So we've got 2 minutes left on this Zoom. So if possible, Terry, have you got a last word about this book that fits into 2 minutes?
I think it's the greatest book since the Bible. It's a good early yarn, so it is. And I'd say it's really funny. I have to pinch myself sometimes. I had a book before, but then we had a film, then we had a musical. And this year, I was on Once Upon a Time in Northern Ireland, and that got regained a lot of attention. I also did a mural, and at the same time I did a mural in Derry for the Undertones, and a book, and all sorts of just as exciting as it was years ago, except Greg Cowan of the Outcasts said that I've become a professional Terri Hooley. I don't know what that means. Maybe it means I've sobered up. But Greg then said to me recently, we were making Stuart and Greg and I were meant to be meeting 90 Americans down near a hotel in Belfast. And Greg says to me, you never let me down. We never had an argument. They never let me down, and I want to thank you for that. And they're doing a world tour. When I heard them the first time, I thought they were the worst band I'd ever heard. But it's to this day, I do not know how I ended up being their manager, their record label, and they were the closest band to me on the label. I've never been able to figure that out. But I will say what I said in that program. I always wanted to say to my grandchildren when they asked me, or my children, when they asked me, what did you do during the troubles, Daddy? I want to be able to say, I partied a lot, I drank, I did drugs, I had a great time, and I never killed anybody. And that's the truth.
That's a pretty good place to leave it. So, well, thanks, Terry. It's great to see you again. And thanks, Stuart. Great to see you again as well.
John.